I'm actually really excited about this session.
Good.
So
Let's go.
everyone, have a seat because for my own selfish reasons, I want to talk to Mark and ask him a bunch of questions.
Folks on the side, feel free to come in.
You're all welcome to eavesdrop, but I'm just going to go ahead. Well, first of all, Mark, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and I think so. You graduated Cornell in 1991, and I know you joined the NBA in 1999.
Yep.
I graduated in 2002. And I believe that there was a time you probably came and spoke on campus during that time frame, because I remember like vividly you speaking about joining the NBA and some of the work you were doing. And it just was like one of those early memories of me as a student being like, oh my gosh, like this is someone who is really doing something cool in the world. So it's really full circle to sit down with you today and talk to you about your entrepreneurial journey with the NBA. But maybe like before we dive in, there was a gap between the time when you left Cornell and started the MBA 8 or so years later. What were you up to during that time?
Yeah, the reason there was a gap is because I had no idea that you could pursue a career in sports. So I'll take you even before 1991. When I went to Cornell, I was a pre-med student. I grew up here in Brooklyn, New York. I went to PS 181, IS 227, and Brooklyn Tech High School. And I was and still am the oldest son of two immigrant parents. I actually am an immigrant. I was born in Vietnam in the middle of the Vietnam War. And when you're the oldest son of an immigrant, of immigrant parents, in my particular case, I was going to be a doctor. So from the time I was this big and from the time I could recall, my parents would introduce me as, this is our oldest son, Mark. He's going to be a doctor. It's familiar to many of you, I'm sure. And so I went through junior high school. I went through high school telling everyone when they said, what are you going to be when you grow up? I'm going to be a doctor. It was just ingrained in my head. And then I took organic chemistry, and that's when I decided I didn't want to be a doctor. So organic chemistry did its job with me. Its job was to weed people out that didn't really want to do it, and it worked with me. But at that point, I was lost, and I was at Cornell. And this is why I'm so thankful for Cornell, because Cornell allowed me, now that I had my dreams dashed, I was lost. And I went to the Career Center office and I said, help me. I have no idea what I want to do. I thought this is what I was going to do. Now I have no idea what I want to do. They gave me a Myers-Briggs test. They said, take some classes in the ag school. And I ended up taking some classes, Intro to Business Management, transferred from the College of Arts and Sciences into business management. The at the time it was Army. I think it's not an undergraduate, the Dyson School. And that allowed me to then go pursue this business career. And so when I graduated in 1991, and by the way, I played baseball at Cornell, so I played baseball growing up. So I loved sports. I just didn't know, this was 30 something years ago. I didn't know you could actually earn a living in sports. So I came out, worked for Procter & Gamble, and through on-campus recruiting. And the reason that was so important is because, again, I had never gotten exposure to the world of business. So I wanted to go someplace where I could actually learn the fundamentals of marketing, the fundamentals of sales, the fundamentals of business. And back then, there wasn't a better place in the world to do that than Procter & Gamble. I still use some of the frameworks I learned when I was at Procter in my roles today. And so I did that. And then in 1994, the last time, the World Cup of soccer is coming back to the US in 2026. But the last time it was here was in 1994. And Procter & Gamble happened to be a sponsor of that World Cup. And I actually wasn't a huge soccer fan. I was one of those American fans that said, how could a 1-1 draw be exciting, right? And there's probably some of you that still wonder that. So I wasn't a soccer person, but there was this big global event. Procter was a sponsor. And I remember, and I got selected to be one of the people to bring that sponsorship to life for Procter & Gamble. And we hired an agency called IMG. And I remember going to the people that I was working with saying, so what do you do after the World Cup is over? Like what do you do after that? And they say, well, we go work with other sponsors on the MLB All-Star Game, on the Super Bowl, on the NBA All-Star Game. I said, time out. You do this for a living? And they said, yeah, this is what we do for a living. So I did my research and I said, this is what I want to do, because I love the sales and marketing at Procter. But at the end of the day, I was selling toilet paper. right? I was selling bleach, I was selling toilet paper, and I love sports. And so I said, this could be a way for me to combine my passion for sales and marketing with my passion for sports. There were no sports business programs back then. It wasn't the business. There was no sports business journal, which is a weekly journal that covers the business of sports. So I had no idea that that was a career path. And that's probably why when you were coming out, when I went back, you were probably like, wow, this guy's working in sports because I had never seen that at Cornell and hadn't experienced that. So Procter & Gamble went to work for the Clorox company, and it was a bigger opportunity. Quite frankly, at that point, I had made my mind up that I wanted to go pursue a job in sports. I actually sent my resume out to commissioners and team owners and didn't get a response back. And so I realized I had to do something different. And I ended up going to a conference, meeting a woman who worked for the NFL. I asked her for some advice. She said, you've got great experience. At that time, I was at Procter and Clorox. She said, you've got great experience. You just don't know anyone in the business of sports. And at that time, you needed to know somebody in order to get a job in the business of sports. So she said, if I were you, I'd go back to business school. And so that's when I went back to HBS, which I know you're an alum of as well. I chose HBS for two reasons. One, just the reputation of HBS, but two, when I looked at some of the key people in the business of sports, the president of the NFL, president of NFL properties, senior vice president of the NBA, Tiger Woods' first agent at IMG, Hughes Norton, they all went to HBS. And I said, that's where I want to go for business school. So I applied there. It was the only business school I applied to, got in, and then ended up going to HBS. Between my first and second year at HBS, I worked for Pepsi in their sports marketing group. Pepsi was a sponsor of Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, NASCAR. That summer, I did a project for Major League Baseball on behalf of Pepsi. I met the president. He handed me his card. He said, stay in touch with me. Stayed in touch with him, ended up doing a field study project for academic credit. And he made me an offer to come work for him right after I graduated. So that was sort of that 91 through 98.
Yep.
Worked for baseball for a year. And then the NBA recruited me in 1999 as a director of corporate sponsorship. And I've been there for the last 25 years. And 10 years ago, when Adam Silver became the commissioner, he gave me his role as the deputy commissioner and chief operating officer.
Got it. Wow. Okay. So it's also, there's a theme of, earlier we had a speaker, Liza, was talking about you get recruited to boards when you're on boards. It's like you get recruited to sports when you're in sports already. And it's like breaking in is always hard, but then there's like something that opens up.
The hardest job to get in sports is the first one.
Yeah, that's
once you get that first job in sports, then it becomes a little bit easier, but that's the hardest job in sports.
Okay, so NBA. I'd love to I'm sure we all would love to understand a little bit about how this works. We know the teams, 30 teams in the NBA. They all seem like big businesses in and of themselves, but the NBA is a business. Like, how does this work? Can you break it down for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're about a $13 billion business when you combine the league and the teams. The league represents about half of that. The teams represent the other half. Our big revenue streams are obviously the licensing of our content to media channels, whether that's in the case of today, we just did a new $77 billion deal over 11 years that will kick in next year. But this year, our partners are the Disney Corporation. So our games are on ESPN and ABC, and then TNT with Warner Brothers Discovery. And so they pay us billions of dollars to broadcast those games. They then control the advertising for that. So they go out and they make their money by selling advertising to our programming. So that's our biggest source of revenue collectively amongst our teams and the league. And you have national TV revenue, and you also have local TV revenue. So if you're here in the New York area, MSG network, you can get Knicks games on the MSG network on a local basis, and in other places there are regional sports networks. We don't have to go too much into that. There's a transformation going on right now in the regional sports space, but that's the majority of our revenue, is the licensing of our content to show those games to fans, where those companies can then go make money by selling advertising on that. The second big part is ticket sales. So we have 82 games in the NBA, and teams have the opportunity to go out and sell those tickets. Our attendance, we set an all-time attendance record last year. That number's been trending up, particularly after COVID. I think people really now value that live experience and wanting to be together and experiencing things live and events live. So that's a huge revenue stream. And then we have our sponsorship and merchandise sales. So, when you see, Kia is the official automobile of the NBA, or American Express, the official credit card, Pepsi is the official soft drink. So those companies, State Farm, I think some of you might be familiar with the State Farm commercials that are out there that use NBA intellectual property. They associate themselves with the NBA brand to create marketing and programs to appeal to their customers. And then merchandising, the sale of jerseys and T-shirts and those sorts of products, licensed products. So that's what our business consists of.
I assume gaming is also just one of those IP deals that falls into that list.
Exactly, that's right. That's a new category that opened up to us relatively recently, and
Got it.
up until 10 years ago, sports betting in the United States was largely illegal, except for Las Vegas. Now that's opened up in many different states, more than half the states now, accept sports bets, and we're a licensor of our content there. So we're not participating in the handle, but people are licensing our marks, paying us money to license our marks and to promote those games.
So not so dissimilar from Disney in the sense that you have this stable of IP and you are figuring out how to monetize it and license it out and everything else. The revenue comes in to the NBA. How does it get distributed to the teams?
It's a great question. So our governance, we're run by 30 NBA teams. So every team has to have what we call a controlling governor.
I think that's more bosses than Zach has, right?
Which is hard to do in academia, right? Exactly. So, but yes, we have 30 bosses. Each team, again, has one person that they designate as they're the governor of the team. You can have alternate governors, but there has to be one governor who has sole decision-making authority on behalf of that team. That's the person that we listen to as a league. That board of governors of the 30 teams, they basically hire the commissioner, hire the deputy commissioner, and hire the league. And so we're employees of the 30 team owners. Those 30 team owners, in essence, make, from a governance standpoint, all the decisions, the rule changes, whether or not we expand, approval of other owners in franchise sales. So any significant business or basketball issue, those team owners are the ones who vote on those things. Now, our role as management is to run the business, is to get a budget signed off, to decide where we want to make certain investments on behalf of the 30 team owners, and to govern the league, to enforce the rules, to set the rules, to come up with recommendations for how we continue to grow and how we continue to keep the competition compelling for our fans. So that's the structure of it. And then there is, I'll try to simplify it. It's a little bit more complicated than this, but think about of that $13 billion of revenue that we generate, 50% by way of our negotiated collective bargaining agreement with the Players Association goes to player salaries.
Got it.
So, $6.5 billion basically gets split amongst the 30 teams. That creates the salary cap. Those teams then have to spend that money with the players. And again, within that system, we have, you have players who have more seniority, can make more money. The rookies will make less money. So that's all collectively bargained.
Got it.
But at the end of the day, it adds up to the players will make 50% of every gross dollar that we make in salary. I think that has been really helpful to us because the incentives are aligned. So the players really look at us as partners and we look at them as partners. So when we go to them and we say, we want to create this new competition called the Emirates Cup, they say, okay, help us understand why. And we say, because we think it's worth $1 billion. And if it's worth $1 billion, $500 million will go to you all.
Right.
And it makes the conversation a little bit more productive in that way. So, so that's 50% there. Then the other 50%, again, they have to approve our budget.
Mhm.
And then, in essence, whatever is left over from there, after our budget, including investments that we're going to make, then they share that revenue and split that revenue amongst the 30 teams.
Got it. So the players are, I mean, they have their own business in terms of sponsorships of themselves and stuff like that. But
Yes.
anything NBA or team related is kind of done in this way.
Yes.
And when you do a $1 billion Emirates deal or something like that, that the 50% of that just goes into the pot that then it like sort of just increases the salary caps and then everything fills in.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. I mean, the salary cap is a direct function
Right.
of the revenue. And if the revenue grows, the salary grows.
Yep.
If the revenue goes down for some reason, then the salaries would come down as well.
And so, well, thank you. We went through a little bit of a rabbit hole there on the governing aspects, but I find it pretty fascinating. So you're clearly a marketing brand expert. I mean, you came from P&G, that was your bread and butter. And it seems like brand building and brand monetization is very much the essence. What ultimately, how do you measure the success of the NBA as a brand? I mean, obviously there's the dollar and cents, the P&L side of it, but
Yep.
What's the power and potential and the measure of success for the brand?
Yeah, you actually compared us to Disney. I mean, we're a consumer brand. Our product in our particular case is the game of basketball, and it's some of the most recognizable, incredible athletes in the world. And so we're selling the product of basketball under the NBA brand to our consumers, in this case, would be fans. And the way that we are able to generate revenue and the ways that we look at our metrics for success is certainly revenue and revenue growth. But the way that we do that is through those different business lines that I talked about. So the more people that we're able to attract to the game of basketball, and really to the NBA, that we can get watching regular season games, that we can get watching playoffs, that we can get watching the NBA finals as an example. The more of an audience we're able to aggregate, the more that Disney and in our new deals, Amazon and NBC are going to pay us for that audience, because we also have a hard to reach younger demographic, more diverse demographic. And so advertisers are looking to reach our fans. And so the media partners want our fans because they want to go sell to advertisers. And so our job is to grow the number of fans that we have, so that we can become a more valuable asset to sell to media partners, and generate that revenue. So it's really viewership. It's really attendance.
Yep.
Are people coming to our games? How much money are they spending on tickets, on food and beverage? It really is sponsorship. So the number of marketing partners, a company like Emirates being able to attract the Emirates, the Nikes, the State Farms, the DoorDash, all these are marketing partners who say, I want to be associated with the NBA brand, and I'm willing to pay you, in some cases, billions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to associate my brand with yours. It's social media engagement and digital engagement. We have some 2+ billion social media followers across the league that we're able to go out and program against and monetize against. So we're in the fan engagement business.
Yeah.
That's our job, is to aggregate the largest number of fans that we can around the world.
Yep.
And so from that perspective, yes, it is about the brand, because there are other brands of basketball. The NBA basketball is not the only brand of basketball. There's college basketball, there's international basketball, but the NBA brand of basketball is what we're specifically out there selling.
I mean, it must be fascinating because you were at the NBA before the age of social media, and to now, as you look back on the impact that has had on every single aspect of your playbook. I mean, I can only imagine. Any sort of moments or inflection points that you remember, stories of like the magnitude of impact this was going to have on your game?
Yeah, I remember the first time that we heard about Twitter. And it was because Shaq posted on some platform called Twitter that he was going to be on some corner in LA. And we started freaking out because we said, what is he doing? Like millions of people are going to show up. And that's when we first started seeing, I remember that moment vividly, like, what's this Twitter thing? And, and why would our players sort of put it out there where they're going to be? And it was eye-opening because our players, and I think this is one of the benefits that we have, is our players are of, I see many students here, they're of that demographic, right? They're 19, 20, 23, 24-year-olds. And so they're the early adapters when it comes to technology.
Right.
And so we were hearing about and learning about new technologies from our players. I mean, every single, from Snapchat to TikTok to you name it, all these, back in the day when Facebook, like we learned about these different technologies because those players were the ones that were early adapters of it. And so we've always been very open to listening to them, to getting their feedback, to engaging with them, so that we can understand what the younger demographic and how they were consuming content. So we were, and I think that's why in the world of sports, the NBA is generally viewed as being out ahead of that because our players are authentically using it, and we're really listening to them, and because we want to listen to them because we think there's a tremendous benefit. So, and I actually also think it has contributed tremendously to the acceleration of the growth of the game internationally, because now it is one global digital world. So, a hit song in Africa is a hit song here, and there's like the consumer, the global consumer, listens to the same things, watches the same things, dresses in the same way. And I think that allows us to reach this truly global audience through technology.
Yeah, and I'm sure people getting to know the players as people, only boosts attendance and creates myths and whatever else. I mean, obviously Caitlin Clark in the WNBA, but just the other examples of people that are just able to, it's almost like a persona-led growth as opposed to a product-led growth. It's all about the people.
Absolutely. And again, there's in our particular case, we've got 450 NBA players, right? They're all sort of individual contractors, if you will. They're all their individual brands, and there's risk with that. And I've been in the NBA long enough to remember when the NBA players didn't have sort of the stellar reputations that they do now. I actually think social media has helped that, and because now some of the young players, even in high school through overtime, for example, they are global brands. Cooper Flagg is well known, and he's a freshman at Duke. That's because he became a star in high school. Zion Williamson became a star in high school.
So they're under the scrutiny of the public, and
exactly
keeps their behavior in check.
Yeah, they're more aware that everything they do is under this microscope, and so they're more conscious of it. They surround themselves with people who manage their brands in a little bit of a better way. And I also think the advantage that NBA players have is the proximity to the court, the fact that they're wearing shorts, that they're not wearing helmets, their faces, and they just have great personalities, and they really lean into that on social media so that you feel like, I really know about Steph, I really know about LeBron, I know a lot about these players, and I give them credit for sort of putting it out there authentically.
So quick question on the global aspect of the business, because I understand us all rooting for our home teams and everything else, but it's fascinating to me how big the NBA is overseas. And I know that you're also particularly focused on Africa and India and China. What's the nature of the NBA strategy internationally?
Africa, India, and China. What do they all have in common? Over 1 billion people.
Right.
Right. So if you're in the business of growing audience and growing fans, you got to be where there's more than 1 billion people in the world. And each one of them is a different challenge. Literally half the world's population are in those three places. And so China, and not a lot of people realize this, but they've been playing basketball in China since the late 1800s. The game was invented by Dr. James Naismith. It was invented at a YMCA in Springfield, Massachusetts. And so there were missionaries that went out and taught the game of basketball. And so in China, they've been playing it for over 100 years. The first basketball competition in the Olympics in 1936, China had a team that was in that first Olympics. And so it is a sport that's endemic to them. They don't view it as an American sport. They view it as their sport. So 300 million people play the game of basketball in China. We're the #1 sport in China. That's there's a handful of places in the world where we're bigger than soccer. Soccer generally is the number one sport. India cricket is the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sport in India. So that's a different challenge. But China, we're humming there. The business is growing. We have tons of fans there. India is the opposite. India, as I said, cricket is so dominant. Basketball is nascent there. So our strategy in India is really grassroots development, trying to get more kids to play the game in schools, through junior NBA programs. And then Africa is an interesting one because when we've been doing things in Africa, clinics, Basketball Without Borders, different activities in Africa for over 20 years. But over the last, I'd say 6, 7 years, when we started going to Africa and talking to the heads of states and the heads of the private sector about, what is it that we can do to be helpful to you here? One, youngest population in the world, again, 1 billion people, youngest population in the world, fastest growing youth population in the world. And what they said to us is, any way you could help us grow economies, create new jobs for these young people is critical for us. And what we realized is that sports in Africa is not a business. Sports in Africa is competition. So there is sports. You have 2 teams, they come out, there's a winner, there's a loser, everyone goes home, but it's not a business like it is here in the US, in Europe, in other parts of the world. So we launched a league there called the Basketball Africa League. This is our 4th season, 12 teams across the continent. We played in South Africa, in Senegal, in Egypt, and Rwanda this year. Next year, we'll play in Morocco. We're starting to see now investment in infrastructure, meaning arenas. There's a new arena in Kigali, a 10,000-seat arena in Kigali. There's a new arena in Senegal. There's new projects in Nigeria. There's a new project in Kenya. So we're starting to see people now investing in building this infrastructure and creating the crypto.com Staples centers or the Barclays centers of those different, of Kigali, of Dakar, of Cairo, in those different markets. And you're starting to see now marketing agents talk about entrepreneurship, these marketing agencies who now have to get into the business of selling tickets to basketball games and promoting the fans. So we're now sparking this industry called the business of sports in Africa. And there's a ton of talent on the continent. We have 50 players today in the NBA that were either born in Africa or have one parent that was born in Africa, including 2 of the last 3 MVPs in Joel Embiid and Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Rookie of the Year, Victor Wembanyama. His parents are from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. So there's an incredible amount of talent in Africa, which is a little bit different than, again, India and in China.
Yep. Last question, then we'll turn it over to questions out here. But just as someone who has ascended in the organization and has experienced this notion of entrepreneurship, really leading change within a company, I don't know, what are some of your cardinal principles for those of us that are in exciting businesses or growing markets with tons of potential that want to lead change, have a vision in our mind's eye of what there should be? What have you learned over the years for that?
I think the thing that we have been particularly good at, and I give the late David Stern credit for this, and now Adam Silver, but it's part of our culture, is that don't get too comfortable, and we've seen that with other sports leagues, where they sort of know that they need to evolve, they need to change, they need to, I guess I'll use the example of Major League Baseball, for example. I worked at baseball, I played baseball, but now recently they've made some pretty significant changes, pitch clocks, bigger bases, automatic walks to first base, things where they started listening to the fan and listening to the, in some cases, the consumer that says, hey, you have to adapt. I think you constantly have to adapt as a business. I was speaking to some people yesterday where I said, if the answer is ever, well, this is how we've always done it, that's a bad answer, right? Because the world is changing so quickly right now that you have to constantly evaluate everything that you're doing. So and I think that's why you see from us, we created this in-season tournament called the NBA Cup. And tonight's a cup night, by the way. I mean, we took this opportunity to say, how can we take the regular season, which has been 82 games for however long it's been, and how can we ascribe more value and more excitement to those 82 regular season games? Because we were hearing some feedback from fans like, it's a long season. And we're hearing that from players, it's a long season. And at the end of this NBA season, there's one NBA champion. The other 29 teams feel, and their fans feel like it was a disappointing season. So we said, can we create another chance to win something in the season? European soccer does it. You know, European basketball does it. Why can't we do it?
Right.
Or the very first time, you know, of any of the North American traditional sports, we were the first one to put logos on jerseys. And I remember same thing, remembering saying, if Manchester United can actually put Chevrolet across their jersey, why can't the Indiana Pacers put a logo on their jersey? We're not even saying take off the Pacers. We're just saying put a logo on there. And but there were some people that would say, that's blasphemy. We just don't do that in the US in sports, right? Fans won't accept it. Well, again, having the global experience, I looked at that and I said, you could walk around Europe and fans are walking around with Chevrolet jerseys and all kinds of jerseys over there. I think fans will accept it, right? So it's pushing the envelope and always thinking about who is the consumer, who is the person you're trying to reach, and are you evolving to make sure that your product is relevant and staying relevant to that group.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you. Let's see some questions from the audience in the time we have allowed here.
Well, hi, Mark. Thank you for your time and giving us insights into the sport industry. So one question I had was, so the NBA is very spotlighted, right? There's so many fans. You have one of the biggest demographics and age range you compass. But with that, there's a lot of opinions. So how does the NBA deal with the mass amount of backlash they get on Twitter, X, when a game doesn't go right? Or, you know, when there's a huge state that, you know, like I'm Indiana Pacers. So I'm from where Caitlin Clark is, era, and that's really changed kind of Indiana's economy. But also there's a huge amount of backlash when a game doesn't go the way we want it to go. So how does the NBA deal with that? Does that affect the NBA's brand? Just want to learn more about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think we're fortunate that we have such passion in our business, right? Our fans, our consumers are passionate. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes that's really bad. And I think being able to listen to them and hear them and filter through some of the feedback that we're getting and always trying to do the right thing. Like as we think about the decisions that we're trying to make, we try to make sure that they are data-based decisions. So there's a lot of anecdotal stuff that you can hear, but you can really dive deeper in fan sentiment. And for example, I mean, for those of you that really follow the game, you know that we've made significant rule changes because we heard from some of our fans, and we actually tested certain things about, you know, for example, our fans hated that our players were flopping. So we said, we got to do something about that. Or they hated, you know, the play where players were sort of jumping in looking for fouls, right? We eliminated that. Like we got that feedback from the fans. We survey our fans on a regular basis, and they said, we don't like that. We think that's not pure basketball. And so we changed those things through the competition committee, and we had a competition committee meeting. Literally, I was upstairs in a conference room talking about these basketball issues and what the state of the game looks like today. I will tell you, one of the things that we're hearing, and we're studying this now, is some people are saying it's too many threes, right? And that there's just three after three after three after three. So we're measuring that, we're tracking that. And if we find out that fans don't like that and they think that our players are taking too many threes, there are things that we're going to do to adjust that and change that. So we listen to the fans, and I think that's important. But I also think on more controversial issues, we get that feedback, and then we have our principles, we have our values, and then we make the best decision that we think we can make in that moment. And then I think the key for us is that we're always transparent in why we made that decision, no one's ever, we're never going to, I think we acknowledge that we're never going to get 100% of people to agree with us. But if we can at least explain our rationale and be transparent about why we made a decision, you may agree or disagree, but at least you're not going to say, I have no idea why the NBA made that decision. We're gonna try to explain that to you.
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate you coming today. I'm a fellow pre-med myself, so
Organic chemistry?
organic chemistry
There
is
you
what did it
go.
for me too. So I know the exact answer to that question. What's the impact that you see of NIL and the money that's going to the kids in the college ranks today? How is that impacting both the recruiting that you're seeing into colleges and then the longevity that they have in schools themselves?
It's a great question. I think the short answer, for those of you that don't know what NIL is, it's something called name, image, likeness that allows now college athletes and even high school athletes in some places to basically go and sell their name, image, and likeness, sort of an endorsement deal. You know, professional players have had the opportunity to, as Scott said, LeBron can go do a personal endorsement deal with Nike and get paid, a ton of money to wear Nike products. Now, high school students and college students can do that. And before, they were not allowed to do that. So it's unclear, quite frankly, what the true impact is going to be. I mean, there's such disruption that's going on in college sports right now. And I think some might argue that at some point, some of these clubs now are operating like pro teams. They've actually hired former general managers to assemble a team. And you've got something called these collectives that basically goes out and raises money from alums that they can then go out and distribute to say, okay, we've got now, make it up, $20 million at University of Alabama. It's more than that, but for example, $20 million at University of Alabama. And these are, the local auto dealer, the local insurance provider. So they've all committed to spending money on NIL deals for athletes. And then the person at these colleges say, okay, I got $20 million to spend. Okay, I'm going to go recruit a quarterback. I'm going to go recruit a running back, a defensive lineman, right? And so they're starting to operate like professional franchises. And so what happens when those organizations start competing against the NFL and the NBA? So it's unclear right now. I still think for us and for the NFL, the best players in the world want to play in the best leagues in the world. And I think we provide that top level of competition and the prestige. And we're still a much bigger business than the NCAA. So there might be individual players who can, and it actually had one specific impact on us. We had a team called G League Ignite, which was designed for our eligibility rule is you have to be 19 years old and 1 year removed from high school to be drafted into the NBA. And so we created this program called G League Ignite because there was some demand for high school kids who said, hey, I want to play in the NBA. I don't want to go to college. At the time, you couldn't get paid in college. So they would go play internationally. And we created a solution for them to say, those players can come play on this Ignite. And we paid them right out of high school to go play professional basketball. We shut that program down because what we realized is we were now competing with Duke in Kentucky for these players. And we said, we're not going to do that. Like these players would now not prefer, but they're okay going to Duke in Kentucky and Syracuse, because they can get paid and they'll get drafted 1 year after that. So, but it is disrupting college sports, and it's unclear what the impact's going to be right now in professional sports.
So especially since you're sitting up there with Scott, wondering how you use generative AI on a day-to-day basis, if you do, how the commissioner's office is using it? It's
a great question. We do, and Scott is a fantastic partner of ours. We're using AI in all sorts of ways. I mean, we're using AI with respect to translation for our games. So our games are now broadcast in 60 different languages around the world, 214 different countries. One of the big parts of growing our fan base is we know that you're more likely to watch a game if you can watch it in your native language. And we're testing different things like taking different personalities. So if you're a Knicks fan, can you have, without having Spike Lee actually call the game, could you work out a deal with Spike where, using generative AI, you listen to a game and it's as if Spike were calling the game.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
That'd be awesome.
Or LeBron James, or we're also doing using generative AI for things like simulations of games as well. So, video gaming now. I mean, for those of you that haven't seen some of the latest video games, I mean, it's so good. It almost, if you look at it and you just kind of glance at it, you might think it's actual game footage. We're using generative AI to do things like, there's all these wonderful debates in sports, right? Would the Michael Jordan Bulls have beaten the Miami Heat led, LeBron James Heat, right? And now you can sort of simulate that through AI and create new products around that. So we're thinking about what are the different products you can create as a result of generative AI. I mean, I personally use AI every single day to brainstorm different ideas and to just really think out of the box in terms of different ideas for us. But we're integrating that in everything that we do right now.
Okay. First, thank you for your presentation. My name is Yang Shuo. I'm from China, and I'm a very big fan of NBA. I've watched NBA for more than 20 years before Yao-Ming joined NBA. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So my question is also related to social media. So with the development of social media platform like TikTok, so many like basketball influencers emerged. Some of them may have the capability to play for the professional league, but they choose to become an influencer, maybe for more money or for more followers. They even organize their own like siblings league. They even launch their own like sneaker brand. So some people think it's positive because they can help to promote NBA, or to promote like basketball game, while others see it as negative because they literally steal the audience, maybe even some potential athletes from professional league. So what's your opinion about it?
And this is who? This is TikTok?
Yeah, TikTok.
So people not being professional and instead becoming influencers, is that the idea?
Yeah, they may have more followers. They have millions of followers, and I think some like, for example, I spend a lot of time to watch them to play basketball.
Oh, right. So some of the influencers, right? And so for example, are you talking about influencers that are playing basketball and people watching them and say, so here's the good news, and this on Douyin? Yeah, that's ours. NBAX. So we created something in China. So we created a basketball league in China that are influencers. That's broadcast on Douyin, which is owned by TikTok, right? And we control that and we own that. And I think a big part of that is we want more people to love basketball. And we know that these influencers they're influencers and they have big audiences and big followings, and they also love basketball. So we actually created this league of influencers in China and broadcast it on the TikTok platform in ByteDance. And so, we're now monetizing that. And I think there's an opportunity for us to use that to expose some people that may follow the influencer, but maybe didn't follow basketball, and translate that now and transition them to following the NBA game too. So I think there's a lot of cross promotion there. And again, in that particular case, you wouldn't know that we were behind that, but we're the ones that are behind that.
That's cool. Awesome.
Also, I have a very short question. I heard the rumor that NBA China game will resume next year. Right? Is that true?
There's a good chance that will happen. We haven't announced anything publicly yet, but I am going to China in 2 weeks. Okay. So don't be surprised.
Okay. Well, now we know Mark's travel schedule. So we know where Shaq is standing in LA, and we know where
exactly.
Mark's heading.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for these great questions.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Scott.